In this video, we're going to be talking about the lymphatic system, and this system is covered in chapter 21 of your textbook. Everything that you need to know for purposes of the test should be explained and detailed in this video, but as always, I encourage you to seek out other resources, and the OpenStax text is a good one, but again, it's contained within chapter 21, all right? Imagine your body has a cleaning crew. And this cleaning crew kind of helps keep things in order. Within our body, this crew is referred to as the lymphatic system and the organs and structures that are found within it. And it helps your body get rid of waste. It helps the body's ability to fight infections, and it keeps our fluids balanced. And I want to apologize. My voice is a little low and raspy. I am getting over a cold, so just bear with me. I have captions on, and so I hope that it is nice and clear for you to understand kind of what is going on. Okay. So by the end of this video, I want you to simply be able to describe the main functions of the lymphatic system, explain the structure, distribution, and source of lymph and lymphatic vessels. I want you to identify the primary and secondary lymphatic organs and explain their roles. And then I want you to describe the structure and function of lymph nodes and the effects of lymphatic system dysfunction. So what happens when things go wrong? There's only 4 learning objectives. So as you may suspect, this is one of your shorter videos in this unit. One of the shorter in terms of content is one that we don't go into too much detail in, just because it's so related with a lot of the other systems that you may hear it in this system, but you're probably going to hear it again when we talk about a different system, for example. Your body has fluids that move around all the time, okay? Like blood. Many of you guys are probably familiar with blood, but we also have a fluid called a lymph, and lymph is the fluid that is pulled from our blood vessels and enters into our interstitial space. So it enters into our tissues. And so that fluid that kind of accumulates and builds up there, we call it lymph. But sometimes extra fluid and waste will build up in our tissues. And so the lymphatic system is designed to help remove this extra fluid and waste. And so it acts like a drainage system that takes away the garbage so it doesn't pile up and cause swelling. My voice is terrible. Swelling, which when we refer to the presence of swelling or the pathology in a sense, we refer to it as edema. So swelling is the same thing as edema. And edema is the consequence of a malfunction of the lymphatic system. Now, after you eat your food, your body is going to break it down, right? In your stomach and in your intestines and all different regions within the gastrointestinal tract. Some of the fat in the food is absorbed into the lymphatic system instead of your blood, and part of that is due to the size of fat molecules. They don't easily diffuse across our capillaries, okay? And so the lymphatic system helps transport these fats to the rest of the body so it can be used for energy and other important functions. It's like having your own delivery truck for your nutrients. The lymphatic system also helps protect you from getting sick, and it does this by filtering out the harmful stuff like bacteria and viruses that can make you sick. It also uses special soldiers, if you will, called white blood cells, which are going to be found in places like your lymph nodes. So think of your lymph nodes as they're dispersed all throughout your body as these little security checkpoints that check the fluid. And we talked about the fluid that enters into the tissue space as lymph, but it checks the lymph for anything that may be bad, so like germs and bacteria, and then immune cells can be sent out to attack those foreign bodies. There is a network of vessels and their associated structures that partner and work very closely with the cardiovascular system to carry out the roles of the lymphatic system. And so here you can see the general distribution of the anatomy here. And if I pull up my laser, we have capillary networks. When we talk about the cardiovascular system, you know, we may have larger vessels, and we have larger arteries, larger veins, but eventually they get smaller and smaller, and they have their smaller counterparts. So the smallest type of blood vessel that we have are our capillaries, okay? In very similar in anatomy, we have lymphatic capillaries, okay? In their close proximity to each other, as you guys can see here and you can see here, is going to allow for the collection of lymph that occurs within those lymphatic capillaries to be able, or sorry, it's going to allow for the fluid that is within our blood capillaries to be able to leave out of the blood capillaries into the tissue space and then enter directly into the lymphatic capillaries, okay? All right, lymphoid cells are cells that make up lymphoid tissue, okay? In these tissues, we will find an abundance of immune cells. In fact, it serves as a site of proliferation for our lymphocytes, okay? So it kind of just serves as like a station or just a concentrated area where we're going to see lymphocytes and macrophages as they filter the lymph that passes through them. Lymphatic capillaries, let me move my laser out of the way here. Lymphatic capillaries are going to represent the smallest type of lymphatic vessel. They are similar to capillaries and they're similar to our blood capillaries in that they feature thin walls and they are extremely permeable, okay? And what I mean by permeable, it means that they have the ability to accept and let things kind of leak in and out of them, okay, to the fluid that they receive. Now, the endothelial cells of these capillaries are not tightly bound, which makes sense because things can easily move in and out of them. The edges of the cells that are adjacent to each other kind of just flap over each other, okay? And these flaps form like these mini valves, which are going to allow fluid from the tissues to enter, okay? And you can kind of see they have arrows here where the actual flaps are, but this is a cell right here, and this is another lymphatic cell right here of the lymphatic capillary. You can see how fluid can just enter into those little slits that are formed by those cells that are just kind of irregularly and loosely attached to each other, okay? Collagen fibers form the anchoring filaments, that's what we call them, that anchor the endothelial cells to the surrounding structures. And this all is going to work due to a pressure gradient that exists between the inside of the lymphatic capillary and to that of what is in the interstitial space. So the pressure difference between the inside of the capillary and the outside of the capillary, just simply put, okay? And what you'll learn throughout, you know, the entire semester and time that we're with each other is that pressure gradients have a lot of power. They're going to drive a lot of movements and a lot of processes that occur within the body and within our actual systems. And so if you're trying to understand why something works in terms of movement, there's a good chance that there's a pressure gradient that is influencing it in some form of fashion, okay? But let's get back, I kind of got on a tangent there. Let's get back to the lymphatic capillaries. Now, when the pressure in the tissues, the interstitial pressure is low, the valves are going to close, okay? And that's going to prevent any lymph that has entered into the lymphatic capillary from leaving, okay? And when the pressure rises, because when we, I lost my train of thought. Back up. When the pressure rises, the valves will open and the interstitial fluid can enter into the capillaries. The fluid is going to flow into the capillaries in a one-way direction, okay? There should not be any lymph leaving the lymphatic capillaries, okay, unless there's a malfunction. I just started talking and didn't really pay attention to kind of what all I had on the slide. I apologize for that. Okay. Now, the only other thing that I will bring up here, as mentioned on your slide, the lymphatic capillaries located within the small intestines are referred to as lacteals. Okay, that is their name. Their anatomical name is lacteals, and these are the capillaries that have the ability to accept our fat molecules. Okay, they have the ability to accept that. So here you can see how close the blood capillaries are. We saw this in an earlier image to our lymphatic capillaries, but also notice how blood flows in one direction, as we know, or we will learn. Well, lymphatic capillaries also carry lymph in a one-way direction. The vessels that make up the lymphatic system, their goal is to carry the lymph to the bloodstream, and so the idea is that lymph is going to be delivered to the heart. Okay, so lymph is going to move in a one-way direction towards the heart. Okay, so if we're talking about lymphatic vessels in our lower extremities, lymph is moving in an upward direction. If we're talking about lymphatic vessels in near the head, towards the head, I will say, cephalic, we're going to be moving down, right, towards the heart. All right, so we have collecting lymphatic vessels, and they are formed by merging of two or more lymphatic capillaries. And so when we look at their structure, they are going to have walls that are similar to veins. They're going to feature the three layers, the three tunica. They're also going to have valves that are going to prevent lymph from backflowing in its pathway. And the valves are going to work very similar to veins, where there is a skeletal pump that kind of keeps things moving. Okay, the skeletal pump is going to drive a pressure gradient that is going to cause the valves to open or close, which is going to influence the fluid that builds up. Now, you can think about a situation where someone who's sedentary, and when I mean sedentary, like they don't do anything. They don't have to do anything. They just kind of lay. Maybe it's someone who's ill. That might be a better example. Someone who's ill and bedridden. There may be a situation where they're maybe pulling a fluid in the lower extremities just because they're not moving. And so instead of lymph moving towards the heart, the fluid just kind of builds up in the tissues and leads to swelling. Okay. And so anyways, that was something I wanted to mention. All right, here is a microscopic image of a valve that is present in the lymphatic vessel. You can see the arrows there pointing to the hot valve. Looks very similar to a venous valve. Okay. All right, so lymphatic trunks, they are going to be the structures that drain lymph from our relatively large body regions. Okay, so we've started talking about our smallest lymphatic vessels in terms of the lymphatic capillaries, and we're just kind of moving through the lymphatic system and the structures that it's going to pass through. Okay, and we're moving through a larger structure. All right, we typically name them based off of the region that they drain. So we have the jugular trunk, which is going to be in the neck region, right? The intercostal trunk, which is going to be near the rib cage, right? We have the lumbar trunk in the lumbar region. They are the largest collecting vessels to unite, okay? And so they are going to receive lymph from the lymphatic vessels, and then they are going to transfer that lymph to a larger structure, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, our collecting ducts. Okay. So the lymphatic trunks are going to join into even bigger tubes called collecting ducts. And we only have two collecting ducts, okay? We have the right lymphatic duct, which is going to drain the right upper abdominal, axillary, brachial, and cephalic regions. And then we have the thoracic duct, which is going to drain everything else. Okay, in the thoracic duct drains the majority of the body. 80% of the body is going to be drained by the thoracic duct. Now, the thoracic duct is sometimes referred to as the left lymphatic duct, but in many of your textbooks on your exam, you're probably going to see it referred to as thoracic duct. Okay. So just note that the right lymphatic duct just drains a little bit of the lymph from the lymphatic system, and then the right lymphatic duct drains just a little bit, and the thoracic duct does the majority. It accepts majority of the lymph from the lymphatic system. Okay, which might make a lot of sense because the goal is to bring it back to the heart, right? And the heart is located on what side of the body? Okay. And so the goal is to kind of dump everything into those vena cava, well, am I thinking about this right? Let me go to the next slide. I don't want to tell you wrong. No, I am telling you wrong. It's come to me, not the vena cava, but the subclavian veins. So it's going to dump directly into the subclavian veins, and then it will go into the vena cava, where it will then enter into the heart. Okay. So here we have two large ducts that receive blood from our larger collecting lymphatic vessels, and they're both located in the thoracic cavity. We have the right lymphatic duct, which is going to drain the right upper body. Okay. And then we have the thoracic lymphatic duct, which is going to drain the rest of the body. Okay. And the lymph that is collected into those collecting ducts are going to be deposited into the subclavian veins, and then it will enter into the heart by way of the vena cava. Okay, so the superior vena cava specifically. Now, when looking at where lymph travels next, lymph leaves the collecting ducts and drains into both of the subclavian veins. The cisterna chyli is like this specialized storage tank, and note where it's located. It's in the abdominal region, so it's going to be close to some of those digestive organs. And so this little area is going to collect fluid before it enters into the bloodstream. It is a small pouch-like structure in your body that acts as a holding area for lymph before allowing it to move into the bigger lymphatic ducts and trunks. Okay. The fluid inside the cisterna chyli is called chyle, and chyle is made up of mostly lymph, but it also contains fat that's been absorbed from the food that we eat, especially after meals. Okay, so this is how we get fats into the bloodstream to get to the areas of the body that we need it. Okay. This is why the cisterna chyli is such an important part of our body's nutrient transport system, because it has the ability to deliver fats to the bloodstream. Fats are too large to easily enter into the blood capillaries. And so this structure allows us to be able to kind of transport it in that way. And so after collecting the fluid, the cisterna chyli is going to send it through a big lymphatic tube called the thoracic duct. The primary lymphoid organs include the thymus and the red bone marrow. These are the sites of immune cell production and lymphocyte maturation. Okay, so the primary lymphoid organs are the organs responsible for creating and developing our immune cells. Okay. The secondary lymphoid organs are going to include our lymph nodes, which are located all throughout the body. We have the spleen, the tonsils, and the lymphoid tissues. The spleen is the largest lymphoid organ located in the upper left portion of the abdominal cavity, right behind the stomach. It resembles a large lymph node, and when you look at it, it is subdivided into lobules. And the lobules, the collections of cells that make up the lobules are separated by connective tissue. It contains two types of tissue. We have white pulp, which is areas within the splenic tissue where we have an aggregation of lymphocytes, and they're going to be kind of arranged around those central arteries. And then we have what is known as red pulp, and these are blood-filled sinuses, where a couple of different things are happening. You have removal and destruction of foreign particles and worn out blood cells. And so, you know, there's a lot going on, okay? It can serve as a temporary blood reservoir, but it's typically where we're kind of processing a lot of the old and unused or expired, I don't like the word expired, but red blood cells that are not functional anymore, okay? And so because, again, we have white pulp, we have the lymphoid tissue, there are macrophages present that can remove and destroy bacteria and worn out red blood cells and platelets through phagocytosis, okay? Like I said earlier, it can serve as a temporary blood reservoir, which is especially important during like traumatic events, like if someone is experiencing a hemorrhage, blood can be released from this area to kind of help remedy the situation, okay? I think the last fun fact about the spleen that I would like to add is this is the site of where we see B cell proliferation and differentiation into plasma cells. And that's something that we're going to talk about when we talk about leukocytes and white blood cells, and when we talk about immunity specifically and kind of the process in developing those cells. The thymus is located above the heart. It is something that is very prominent and larger in size in kids, and it's something that gets smaller and smaller as we get older, okay? And that is because we are not born with our lymphocytes or the most developed immune system. And so during the early years from birth on, our body works really, really hard to try to develop those white blood cells, those lymphocytes specifically. And because because the thymus is where we have maturation of our lymphocytes, it is something that is very large in the earlier years, okay? And then as we get older, it's not as active, and it just becomes this dense, like fibrous tissue, okay? Something that probably most people wouldn't be able to recognize if they were to do an autopsy on someone who is much older compared to someone who is much younger. MALT stands for mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, and it plays a key role in defending your body from infections, especially those that enter through these mucosal surfaces, okay, which are basically the body's entry points to inside the body from the outside world, okay? So where are you going to find this specific tissue? In places where there are openings into the body from the outside world, okay? So in places like the digestive tract, think about your nose, the respiratory tract, the urogenital tract, okay? When we think about the specific organs that consist of malt tissue, the largest collection of malt tissue is going to be found in our tonsils, Peyer's patches within our intestines, and also our appendix. Now let's talk about the simplest lymphoid organs, which are the tonsils, okay? These organs play an important role in protecting us from infections, especially those that enter through the mouth or the nose. Excuse me. Tonsils are organized into nodules, which are just clusters of immune cells that can help defend against pathogens, especially oral pathogen germs that you might breathe in or you might swallow. There are 4 main types of tonsils in the body, each with its own specific location and role. We have palatine tonsils, and we have a pair of those, so we have 2, and they're located at the posterior end of the oral cavity. That's just a fancy way of saying the back of your mouth, okay? Open up your mouth and maybe pretend like you're gonna sing a high note and look at it in the mirror, and you probably see your palatine tonsils, all right? These are the largest tonsils and also are the ones most commonly infected, which is why sometimes we hear people talk about tonsillitis or having their tonsils removed, okay? These are the tonsils they're typically talking about. We also have lingual tonsils. They're found as a lumpy collection of follicles at the base of the tongue. They're a little smaller and they help kind of protect the back of the throat. We have pharyngeal tonsil, and note that this tonsil does not have an S behind it. The pharyngeal tonsil is also referred to as the adenoid. Okay, we only have one. It's at the posterior aspect of the nasopharynx. Fancy way of saying the back of the nose. Okay, if you went all the way up to the nose and you went to the wall, that's what you're talking about. All right. When these tonsils become enlarged, they can block the airways and cause breathing problems, especially during sleep. There are also tubal tonsils, and these tonsils surround the openings of our auditory tubes into the pharynx, and these are going to help protect the ears and prevent infections from spreading. The tonsils are made up of lymphocytes, which are special immune cells that detect and destroy harmful stuff like bacteria. And when you feel the surface of your tonsils, what you'll notice is that it's not smooth. There are these little folds or pockets throughout. Let me see if my laser's still here. Like right here. And we call those crypts. They're called tonsillar crypts. So we have one here. We have one here. You can see a little one there. These are like little traps, all right? They're tiny traps where germs can get stuck. I'm just all over the place with this thing. And the lymphocytes that are located within these little follicles here can go in and do their thing, okay? I'm trying to figure out how to go to the next slide. I apologize for my lack of... Here we go. Next slide. Lymph nodes are going to be located all throughout the body. They're going to be located along our lymphatic pathways. They are going to contain lymphocytes. They're going to contain macrophages, which are going to be very important for destroying microorganisms. And when you look at them, they kind of resemble little beans. So they're bean shaped in nature. Lymph nodes generally occur in groups or chains along the paths of our larger lymphatic vessels. And so you can find them kind of in different areas near the body surface. So when we think about, you know, under the armpit, the axillary region, in the neck area, the cervical regions, the inguinal area, and so they're going to play an important role in kind of collecting the lymph and cleansing and kind of filtering the things that kind of pass through. Okay. Now let's talk about their functions as filters. Lymph nodes are like checkpoints in your body's defense system. They're going to help remove and destroy harmful foreign particles like bacteria or viruses that may be traveling through your lymph fluid. And here's how they do it. There are macrophages that undergo a process called phagocytosis. Okay, and basically these things just engulf the bad stuff. Okay, and so when harmful particles enter the lymph, the macrophages are going to swallow them up in a process called phagocytosis, which basically means it eats them. Okay, and so this helps break down and destroy anything that could be dangerous to the body. All right. There's also going to be immune system activation in terms of the creation and production of lymphocytes. So lymph nodes are like factories for producing lymphocytes, essentially. Lymphocytes are special immune cells that can recognize and fight foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses. And so the lymphocytes are going to help make sure your body is always prepared to respond to infections quickly. So let's take a look at how your body handles fluid balance and what happens when things go wrong. When we think about our blood vessels, specifically our capillaries, they're constantly delivering oxygen, nutrients, and other important stuff to the tissues around them. However, some of this fluid is going to leak out and enter into the space between our cells. And that space we refer to as the interstitial space. This is the tissues, okay? The fluid that leaks into the tissues is within the interstitial space. And this is totally normal. We're going to expect a little bit of fluid loss from the capillaries. It should move from the capillaries because we're going to pick it up by the lymphatic system. And so normally the lymphatic system is going to step in and it's going to pick up the extra fluid from these spaces. And remember that fluid, once it's in the tissues, we call it lymph. And it's going to carry that lymph back to the cardiovascular system where the body can reuse it. This process helps keep the fluid levels in our tissues balanced. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen. When there's a malfunction and the fluid remains in the interstitial space, it can accumulate and start to build up, okay? This is called edema, and it's going to lead to swelling in the affected area. Now, when there is severe edema or massive edema, this is a situation where the fluid buildup becomes severe. It can lead to a condition called elephantiasis. And this is when swelling becomes so extreme that it causes a massive accumulation of fluid in the limbs or other parts of the body, making them look enlarged or disfigured, similar to the size of an elephant's limbs. Okay, and so what you can see on your screen here is someone who's dealing with elephantiasis, and you can see how this leg looks disfigured, okay, and large, very, very large, okay, and this is due to a malfunction. There's a buildup of fluid within the interstitial spaces, okay. So these are my practice questions for you. Hopefully you took really good notes and you won't have to rewatch this video to answer these questions. But if it's something that you would like to discuss in class, I would love to kind of engage in conversation with you about it. I only ask that you take a moment to develop your ideas first. So based off of what you have heard, based off of what you know, and based off of what you have in your notes, kind of what is your thinking in regards to the direction to an answer, and kind of let's pick each other's brains and get you the right answer so that you're prepared for your test.